Hey guys, how's it going? This is Moving Mumbles with Roy Johnson and David Ashe.
Hey everybody.
Who are you? Damn it.
Hey everybody, I'm Ashe K Reaper from www.youtube.ashkreaper.
Oh, WWE. Okay.
I love horror movies.
Okay. Now I'm the last to introduce myself, even though this is my channel. My name is Roy Johnson. Hello everybody. Hello everybody. My name is Roy Johnson, and as you can tell from the others, this is Movie Mumbles, and horror, Halloween. Those are kind of related. Ooh. This is the only thing I had things planned to do on this channel for Halloween, but this is the only thing that's actually going to get done, besides something I did a month ago, so, yeah.
Yeah, you did something, like, at the beginning of September for
yeah.
Halloween.
And then I did nothing else after that. I had plans, but I was like, yeah. So
yeah, you see, I'm British as well, so I completely do not understand Halloween. I just don't give a shit.
It's, yeah. So
it's an American thing.
Halloween's pretty much a purely American thing, right?
Yeah, I think so.
No, well, we do Halloween, as in adults go out to clubs and dress like idiots, and kids knock on doors and annoy me like fuck.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
That's our Halloween. We don't really celebrate it, or I try and ignore the fact that we celebrate it. But yeah,
you're the Halloween Scrooge.
I don't like any holidays, to be honest.
You're just a Scrooge in general of life.
Well, no. This is the way I see it. If you celebrate one day, then the rest of them are shit. Why not just be fine with everything?
That is the most, you are the most cynical optimist I have ever met in my entire life.
Okay.
Cynical optimist.
With all that in mind, let's talk about movies. Oh, by the way, Ashe is the main guest. He's another Let's Player like the both of us, but he's also a cinephile, and we actually did a collab that hasn't actually been released yet. I'm not saying what it is, on Ashe's channel, and during that, he mentioned that he liked Movie Mumbles and I said, you know what? You like it. I'm cool with it. Why not have you on the show? You seem like a cool person, an individual, and so here he is now, and we're going to be talking about horror movies, because he mentioned specifically that he liked horror movies, and
I didn't get a choice in the matter.
No, you didn't.
Yeah, horror movies is my jam, and I was kind of really excited about this because, especially with Womble, seeing his reviews.
Yeah, with Womble.
Yeah. All Americans can't pronounce my name. It's hilarious.
How do you pronounce it then?
It's Womble. Womble. Like a Wombly man.
Wamble.
That's not even American. That's just me. It's the same thing. I love horror movies, but it comes out like I'm trying to talk about movies with prostitutes in it. Oh, I love horror movies. So that's just my accent.
I was gonna make a joke about that, but I didn't.
I was gonna make a joke about that as well.
Right?
I'm glad you got there first.
Bam. Horror movies is my jam, and I am assuming half of this podcast, me and Womble are gonna fight because I know your opinion on it.
Yeah, I don't like horror movies. I think that the majority suck balls now. Even like the classic ones. Like, the type of horror films that I like are psychological horror. Past that, nah.
For me, honestly, I'm kind of like the pussy that's scared of horror movies. And so I used to not watch many of them. I've tried watching some of the classics and all that, but I'm still mostly unfamiliar with it. But I have seen enough to say I like what they're doing. I just don't like watching most of them because I don't like being scared in general. But yeah, so pretty much Ashe is going to be the one that's going to be writing this entire podcast because he's the most familiar with horror films. And if you want, you can explain what you're going to be doing with this podcast because you mentioned an interesting idea.
Yeah.
When you get a guest, let them do this work.
Yeah, get a guest, dial it in. That's what we're here for. So, in my opinion, because horror movies are my jam. I mean, they're my number one favorite genre. In fact, the horror genre, I don't think it's enough credit for anything. It is such a big genre in itself. You can't even call it a movie genre anymore. There's an entire genre of music dedicated to it. It's my personal favorite is called horror punk. For those who know, like late 70s, early 80s punk music, the Misfits kind of spawned that. Now we have shows on the television, like Supernatural and stuff, where like supernatural horror has gotten really big. And I still kind of feel that horror movies in general are considered like shit by most people. And I'm not saying you have to like them, but, you know, give them respect where respect is due. So I kind of wanted to go through like the decades and kind of talk about some of the big hit movies and kind of what they did for the genre and for maybe movies in general. Again, I'm not expecting to make everyone like suddenly go, horror movies, they're awesome, but at least have an appreciation for the genre. That's kind of the idea.
Not gonna happen.
I'm fighting an uphill battle and I know it, but I'm ready for it.
I no, the thing is, actually, I do like the idea of horror films. It's the fact that they aren't done right. That's what I don't like. And I don't like modern horror films. A lot of the things that come out in the cinemas now are all jump scares, and I can't stand jump scares. So, yeah.
I actually agree with you on that 100%, especially with a lot of the problem that horror movies have had in modern times, you know, in the future. I'd say the last maybe 10, maybe even 15 years is the fact that I don't think it's really pigeonholed into horror movies. I think we're just kind of on this remake, remaster, re-envision kind of idea.
Reduce, reuse, recycle.
Yeah. And people aren't expanding, or this is totally like, you know, conspiracy theories, but I kind of feel like, especially with horror movies, they're not giving the audience what the audience wants. They're giving the audience what they think the audience wants. And there's a huge disconnect there from the movie, like, the entertainment industry in general. Does that make any sense?
Yes. Yeah, it does. So you mentioned you were interested in talking about the history of horror movies. You still want to do that, or is that
yeah? Because a lot of this actually segues into like the pre-60s.
Pre-60s.
Well. Yeah. So anything before 1960, horror movies really, I mean, it really wasn't a genre. It was kind of, I mean, genre of movies really weren't that solidified in my opinion. Anything before 1960. And this, I mean, the big movie that everyone knows from the black and white era is Nosferatu.
Yep.
Yeah, it was. Most people consider it the first. It actually wasn't the first, but now we look at a lot of things concerning horror movies like special effects, which makes me sad about jump scares even more. But they didn't have a whole lot to work with back then, so they had to focus on things like lighting and the actual story and things like that. And what most people would consider the very first horror movie was actually a movie called, off the top of my head, I want to say it was called The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, I believe.
Yep, that's pretty much exactly the title. A+.
Awesome. That movie really gives birth to a lot of things that no other genre really does, in my opinion, and something I really appreciate, which it was really the first suspenseful horror movie, not to mention the very first horror movie.
It was. I've seen the movie, and it's a very moody kind of. I really do like the look of it. It's very clearly part of the German Expressionist era, which is pretty much just Tim Burton. What inspired Tim Burton, basically. Everything that Tim Burton has done is pretty much what was established in German Expressionism, and everything in that film is just so askewed and visually interesting. It's not. I wouldn't say black and white even. Like some of the, I'm not sure which version you usually watch, but like the colors. Like, the film itself is colored and tinted in interesting ways that adds to the mood of it. And, if you want to continue talking about it.
I strongly recommend don't seeing any remastered version. See it in its original with the coloring, because I honestly feel, especially with what they were working with at the time, it really gives a better appreciation for it. And you're right, it's very German Expressionism. And, it's one of the things that will set up that you'll see closer into the 80s, where it actually really humanizes any villain, and it was the first movie with a real surprise twist in it at the end, which for those who actually want to go out and see it, I don't want to give it away.
I think it's past the time where
I mean,
spoilers.
there could be like 1,000-year-olds who've never seen it.
I rather not, because if there's any movie that anyone who's like, I wanna at least try to understand horror movies, this is the one that I really recommend, just because, again, this is what really spearheaded the whole horror movie genre. That entire concept of psychological horror didn't even start really coming till decades later. So it's really ahead of its time. And again, that's definitely one of the movies where I say you don't have to like it, but I strongly recommend seeing it just to get an appreciation for what it's done down the road.
To kind of talk about the twist ending without spoiling it, I do think it is actually, it's not M. Night Shyamalan twist, like,
No.
not The Sixth Sense, but like the Shyamalan twist. But it's actually a very good, it's very good, it's very well integrated, it makes sense, and it's also kind of adds to the weirdness of the film. Kind of just to divert it just a little bit before we might change subjects, because this is one film we've talked about so far. During one of the watchings, I actually got to see the film played, the music itself being played by a band who's actually done like this type of like pretend film, because during the 1920s, that's how silent movies were presented. The music was organically created, almost improvisationally, by musicians, basically, and that's how I got to experience the film. So it was a very interesting experience.
There's not much more I could say on that, especially, I mean, Nosferatu and Dr. Caligari were ahead of their time and really spearheaded a lot down the road for things. Caligari was more the psychological aspect, where Nosferatu kind of created the monster movie genre, which, again, pre-60s, I have to give a shout out to the silver age of monsters in the Universal Studios era.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, which that's what, for those not familiar with what I'm referring to, that's like the original, like, Dracula, Frankenstein, Wolfman, Mummy. I believe Phantom of the Opera was Universal Studios. Creature from the Black Lagoon, that black and white era. Names like Bela Lugosi, Boris Karloff, Lon Chaney. That era really set the stage for a lot of monster movies, especially with monster movies, in my opinion. Practical effects and debatably special effects are super important to make those movies work. And we're talking about an era that didn't have, computers to do a lot of the work. And I think, again, just to give them the appreciation that they deserve, what they did for what they had at the time, Universal Studios really nailed the monster movie genre. Especially because they made a point and went out of their way to humanize every single monster in their movies. And I think that was something that I wish people kept doing. Made that a little more of a priority in later movies that I don't feel we get as much anymore.
That specific era of horror movies, they've pretty much revolutionized how we look at Halloween, monsters, all that stuff, Frankenstein, Dracula, the Wolfman. They were established concepts and books beforehand, but their specific takes is what made those characters iconic. Everything,
absolutely,
everything in those films is full of like mythos and iconic moments that have just submerged like throughout like pop culture and history in general. It's really, it's impressive how much of a legacy they've managed to create with these characters, and we still see it to this day. Obviously, like Halloween decorations, they're more likely to look like Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi than how the characters were in the books, basically. Yeah.
Most people, in my opinion, maybe a little closer to your age, Roy, has never even seen any of these movies, but they still recognize the iconic like flathead bolts in the neck Frankenstein, the Bela Lugosi, Dracula. One person who doesn't get enough credit because Bela Lugosi just kind of really ran the show as far as withstanding the test of time. Boris Karloff, in my opinion, was a better actor and really brought to life a lot of those characters, and again, really humanized a lot of the monster aspect. And I really, so I just want to give a shout out to Boris Karloff because I don't think he gets enough credit today that he deserves. So, yeah.
To be honest, I haven't actually. Well, no, I have seen them. I have seen these movies, but I hadn't gotten the chance to see them till not recently, but like a couple years ago. I decided on Netflix to marathon a bunch of these movies in anticipation for Halloween, and many of them still hold up to this day. Like, these were almost 50, no, past 50, almost 70-year-old movies, 80-year-old movies, and they still hold up in terms of, I wouldn't call them scary, but they are very phenomenal movies, I would say. They have interesting plots, interesting characters, and again, they shaped pop culture, so...
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the problem with horror movies nowadays, is they're trying to scare you, and we're the internet age. It's anything that's scary is in reality that we can access on our computer. I think movies try too hard to, and I think that's why we're kind of the spawning of jump scares, which drives me nuts. But you don't have to scare people to make a good horror movie. Other descriptors that could make a really good horror movie is, dark, eerie, creepy, dreading, foreboding. It should fill you with negative feelings, even if it doesn't scare you.
The best horror film that I've seen this year so far was Don't Breathe. Oh god, no, cracks in the voice. It's because I've not been speaking for ages.
How does that feel?
Oh, hello, Womble.
I know, it's not usually like this. It's usually me that can't stop talking.
Yeah.
But so I went to see Don't Breathe, and I really liked that because it made it feel real and realistic, because it puts you in a position. It puts the audience in a position that home invasion is kind of real, and that it switches it on its side and puts it from the point of view from the invaders. And everything that is going on in that film isn't like over the top. There's not any like jump scares or anything like that. Well, there's like 2 jump scares, and they're very small and subtle. And they're the best way to use jump scares because it builds on the tension instead of just fizzling it all out.
Yeah, it's have an appropriate place for them. Don't do it. There's a way to do it where you're lazy, where you're just like, haha, got you, because I needed something to scare you, versus, again, that building up of the tension. I think that's when jump scares really, have a time. Yeah, there's a time and a place, so that's the place for it.
See, but then I will swing round and I would say that the reasons why I haven't seen like Boris Karloff's like Frankenstein's and whatever.
You haven't seen them?
I think he did like a Mummy. No, I haven't seen those. And the reason why I don't is because I actively go out of the way, because they always appearance just seem incredibly campy, and I'm not one that is good when it comes to movies that are just overdo everything. And especially because there's like Frankenstein, The Bride of Frankenstein, and all like the spin-offs that it created. Like, that just kind of puts in my head and says that those sort of films way back in the 30s and the late 20s, and whenever the others were, they're going to be all following the same formula, which is what movies are following now. Like, what's happened is that I would say there was like a really great time for horror films, and that was maybe the 70s and the 80s, where everything was new and experimental with like your visual effects, and you've got movie scores that you can add in easier, and lighting and set changes and things like that is just easier to do, and that's all new. But that everything that they've kind of done has been repeated and repeated and repeated and repeated, and that's why I don't want to go back now and watch those, because I've already seen all the like the tension and the build up in the newer films, which are shit, and going back and watching them and seeing all this like this done for the first time doesn't mean that it's still good.
I partially agree with you, but I partially disagree with you. Are they campy? Yes. I think that is not just the horror movie genre at that era. I think that's just kind of how the acting and film industry was at the time.
That's actually another reason why I don't watch films from that era as well, because the majority of the films are just overly campy and formulaic, and it's not.
That is the part I'll argue with you on.
There are exceptions. But it's finding the right ones, and usually the exceptions don't lie in Hollywood. Like the exceptions are from like the German producers, or the I can't remember what the film studios were in Germany, but so that's the difference. It's usually the foreign films that you won't see because Hollywood hasn't copied off those.
Yeah, it's The only part I'll really argue with is the formulaic aspect. To a certain degree, it is, but that's really, you could say that about any movie when you really break it down.
Well, yeah, that's true.
In the Silver Age of Universal, they went out of their way for certain things that, again, you can think of a few movies, but for the most part, it is not too terribly common to truly empathize with Frankenstein or the Wolfman. And they're the villain, but they're not at the same time. They're a villain due to the circumstances that were created outside their control. And that is something I don't think that is regularly capitalized on and emphasized even to this day. I mean, there's a few movies here and there, but the villains aren't villains just because of some abject evil idea or because they're a monster in itself, you know?
You should go and work for Marvel.
Comic Mumbles don't... Yeah, that's a whole new bag of...
That's a whole new bag of bones. I'm not going to say these movies are scary, like, even one bit. Like, if there was any horror to it, it's now been, like, dated by time, basically. But I do think these films, even with them not being scary, still have a certain mood to it that you can really appreciate. Just the amount of detail they put into the sets and the characters, and just you can clearly tell there was a lot of effort put into these films, and overall they give like incredible experiences. Honestly, I wouldn't say I like every Universal horror movie that I've seen so far, but I do think each of them like gives they put their all into it, and I think it definitely pays off at the end, honestly.
Yeah, definitely. And again, some of these movies, you know, good or bad, there's definitely some appreciation for what they did. Again, these are the movies I think of when I say don't necessarily walk into a horror movie, be scared, but the idea of, you know, morality or right and wrong or good and evil not being black and white, there is you're absolutely right. It is dated, but at the time they definitely carried this eerie, dreadful presence into the movie. But at no point would I ever consider them scary. Probably even back in the day, I wouldn't consider them scary for their time. One movie that, again, due to its time, I don't think you'll like Womble, but I think you could. This one I think I may get you to appreciate. Have you ever heard the movie Invasion of the Body Snatchers?
I have heard of it. I haven't seen it.
Part of the cast, just to give you an idea, is Leonard Nimoy, Donald Sutherland.
That's interesting.
Already
Jeff
on board with
Goldblum.
Nimoy.
That's the 70s version. There's a 50s also version. That was a remake.
Yeah. Well, let me get to that one in a second, because
no worries.
I want to set up, because the 60s is really, really important for three key things. Vincent Price started pre-60s, but he really gained his stride in the 60s, and Vincent Price, I feel, is kind of one of those actors that needs to stay iconic and needs to be remembered and is slowly being forgotten in time, or is known as that dude from Edwards.
Yeah.
Where my age, he's the voiceover for Thriller, but he's what really also was part of what gave credit for Edgar Allan Poe's work. To be brought not to the screen but into pop culture, because the movies he did were like The House of Usher, The Raven, which had a young Jack Nicholson overacting in it. It's fucking gorgeous in all the wrong ways. But like The Pit and the Pendulum. My personal favorite was Last Man on Earth.
Oh, that's basically I Am Legend before I Am Legend, and based on I Am Legend.
Boop, boop,
they're
back
all
up
based
that
on
truck.
the same. They're both based on the same story. I Am Legend.
That's just Dracula.
What?
That's
I Am
okay.
Legend is just Dracula anyway.
Both
No,
of
it's
you
not.
can fuck off at this point. That's,
No, I'm just
whoa,
throwing spanners
and
in the
tables
works
are
at this
being
point. It's
flipped
great.
all over the place. No, okay. So first of all,
I'm so genuinely angry at this.
well done. Okay, let's break it one thing at a time. First of all, to compare I Am Legend and Last Man on Earth is like comparing the Wolfman to American Werewolf in London. You know, they had
So
werewolves.
this is what we've came down to, is that all horror movies are either Dracula or wolves.
What? Hold on. Okay. First of all, Last Man on Earth was actually
Frankenstein.
based was I Am
Frankenstein's actually
Legend.
Dracula.
I Am Legend. And, the book and the movie had nothing to do with each other. I Am Legend. The movie itself was a great action movie. End of story. That had nothing to do with the books or horror or Last Man on Earth. The thing, and kind of what I was thinking about with Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the monsters were kind of bit characters. It was more about in situations. It involved more about humanity more than anything. And pretty much how humanity will destroy itself. And Vincent Price, again, 60s, still had a lot of overacting and it was very campy. But Vincent Price really is what made that movie really work out. And again, Edgar Allan Poe movies, he did a great job on those. But the 60s was also when Night of the Living Dead came out. And of course, Romero's Night of the Living Dead has to be mentioned at least in passing, just because it was actually it was very revolutionary for its time. Also, there was a lot of social commentary that wasn't necessarily intentional. Like this was the first first
movie with an African American in a major role, like
pretty much the lead actor for the most part.
Yeah.
Which again, we're talking 1960s U.S. culture. That's a huge deal.
That's a big deal. Civil rights and all that stuff. No, I mean, that was before civil rights, right? Or around that time?
Yeah, America was fucked up in the 60s.
That sums it up pretty nicely. So, and I mean, the idea of zombies weren't really even truly a thing, other than culturally in some areas. But like the iconic movie Monster Zombie wasn't even in existence when Night of the Living Dead came out. So it was kind of a new idea. And Womble, even though
Frankenstein
flipped out, it had more to do with Dracula than Frankenstein.
Shut up, Womble.
When you come down to it.
Back to the Dracula theory then.
But going along with that, actually, Last Man on Earth is interesting because they are very zombie-like, but they are actually at least in I Am Legend, the original book, they actually are vampires, but they act like zombies. And going along with Night of the Living Dead, that is pretty much how Romero basically made zombies, because every single trope now associated with zombies is originated from Night of the Living Dead.
Night of the Living Dead definitely is what gets the most credit, but Last Man on Earth needs to at least get partial credit for that as well, because, I mean, it was all spawned from the vampire idea, but they started moving into what we now know as zombies. But again, at that idea, it's pretty much look at how a vampire is thought of and look at what those two movies did. In my opinion, that's pretty impressive that they created this new idea that it involves zombie sparkling. You know what I mean? They still kept to the original idea, but spawned an entire new monster genre from it.
And,
like, we're going back to my argument, which is that just because it's created this massive load of shit films which have came out with zombies in, and you can't deny that there are a lot of shit films with zombies in.
Absolutely.
Just because it is the first to do this doesn't mean that it's now acceptable, because I've seen it all done before. And actually, I've seen them improve on that with zombie films, because there are a lot of good zombie films out there, and I do like a few of them when they pop up every now and then. Like the remake of the Dawn of the Dead was okay. It was fine. Like, I could appreciate that. I thought it was good. It had a bit of suspense in it, and it wasn't too gory. But, well, actually, no, it was. It was just, But the whole thing that George A. Romero did, and actually I do love George A. Romero because he's done some fantastic pieces of literature as well, including comics and other stuff, which is just amazing. But just because he did it and it was great back then doesn't mean that it's as good now.
We're talking horror movies here, but your argument sounds like what I could literally talk about every genre of movie in existence. And again,
you can do that, but I for some of the genres I would probably accept that. Like rom-coms, I can definitely accept it for rom-coms because that's the same. It's the same thing. It's just the same movie going out and out and again.
Action movies for the most part
than horror films, and every so often you get a film that's different and new.
Yeah.
But for the most part, like horror is like the second on the line, where they just do too much gore, too much gore. That's a big thing for me, because just because you're grossing me out doesn't mean that you're like freaking me out and getting me tense. It's just kind of distracting me, and it distracts from the story when you do too much.
Well, you say second, but I mean, action movies, explosions and bullets, comedy,
Again,
action,
I've got a
horror,
beef with action film.
tragedy.
I've
It's
got a
all
massive beef
most
with
of it's a
Hollywood
repeat
at
of
the moment as well.
Shakespeare for the most part.
Okay, guys. I gotta moderate between you two opposing forces. This is like the presidential election right now. But like,
You afraid in the tie-up I'm gonna bite his ear off, or it's Mike Tyson reference?
Well, the thing is, I've got beef with every genre.
yeah,
Like,
Yeah.
I could go into why
you're
I
a very
don't like
beefy
Well,
man,
I-
Womble.
I'm not disagreeing with you.
a lot of the genres, but let's not go into those genres now.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
We'll stick with the horror film.
All my
so.
point was specifically is that argument. I don't disagree with you. I just don't think it's specific to horror movies.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that.
Because as we're talking about this, I mean, again, in the 60s, we're also talking about the Hitchcock era.
Oh yeah. I want
yeah.
to talk. I want to talk about. Yeah, I want to get to that since you were talking about
this
the
is where I'm
60s.
going to have to concede that I love the Hitchcock movies.
I mean,
think
the
they're really
Hitch-
well done.
I mean, let's
Great
just go straight to Psycho. I
Yeah.
mean, that's because that's the one everyone thinks about. Yeah, and since we're talking about horror movies, which out of it's either wolves or vampires, The Birds. Which one is it? Is that one wolves or vampires?
That one is nature, which comes from.
I haven't actually seen the.
That
Birds.
one's God.
I don't really know that one. You've listed the one Hitchcock film that I haven't actually seen.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've heard I've heard things about The Birds. I've heard like it's a good horror movie, but it's also one that modern
It's a bit-
audience might not get.
Yeah,
because
I've heard a lot. I've heard that that's probably one of his, like the one that I'm gonna like the least. I think.
Yeah,
out
I
of
would
his
agree.
Filmography, which is why I've probably moved away from it and not.
But
gone
still,
to
it sounds like it still seems like an interesting idea. It's definitely a risky idea that, well, Hitchcock would do a movie about birds and attempt to make it threatening. And I do, from what I've seen, it actually does look. I mean, it looks dated, but it does look like in that aspect of cinema, you can tell he's trying, and I think in some levels he does succeed. I think.
Well, no. I'm sure it's a perfectly good film, and it's going to be so much better than a film called Birdemic, which is just the worst film ever made.
That was The Birds, but awful.
Yeah, well, it was. It was trying to do a remake, and it was on such a crappy budget as well.
Yeah. Okay. Let's not talk. Let's talk about Hitchcock. Let's not talk about Birdemic.
Yeah, okay.
So Psycho.
Well, just like we gave credit to everybody else, before we talk directly about Psycho, because it kind of leads into that anyways, I would say Hitchcock was definitely the true father of psychological horror.
And like
Yes.
he's the master of suspense, and definitely in terms of suspense, he knows how to grab you by the balls.
See,
basically,
no, I wouldn't say he's the master of suspense. I would say he was the first one to do it.
he was the first one.
I reckon that directors now, who are doing the same things that he was doing, they've added to it. And that, if you compare the directors without the time difference, they would probably be slightly better now because they've got, like, they would know the materials that they've got. Like,
But I think
anyone
Hitchcock
can be a Hitchcock these days.
Yeah, but the
because,
thing is,
like,
Hitchcock
it's
was
readily accessible. So,
But the thing is, Hitchcock was the first person to like
Yes.
basically spell out what makes suspense work.
like, Hitchcock was before his time as well because nobody really appreciated it.
Yeah,
back
comparing
then.
directors of that genre and writers of that genre now versus back then, I kind of feel like is comparing pumpkins and jack-o'-lanterns. There is similarities there, but taking into account, the special effects, the inspiration that individuals can now, I don't think one is better than the other. I think for what they're working with in their time, I think
exactly.
one master versus a different master kind of thing. You're just cynical, so of course you had to downplay Hitchcock.
Okay, but I think Hitchcock really set in stone what suspense wants. He gave the example of it's more suspenseful for the audience to know there's a bomb under the table that the audience doesn't know, because we have a sense of awareness of the character's tone, and that's more suspenseful than if we never knew that the bomb happened and exploded. If you want, we can talk about Psycho, because it's a very good film. I will admit it's gotten dated to time, and everyone knows the twist ending, which kind of does ruin some of the suspense of that aspect and some of the twist, honestly. But as a film itself, it is very revolutionary.
It was actually the girl who got killed in the shower. That was.
Oh, damn it! You spoiling shit again. I mean, I just he really did like experiment, and because remember this was during a really strict like code era of cinema where films could barely get away with anything. Literally, this is the first film where a toilet got flushed, and that was seen as very controversial.
I kind of want to. I'm going to kind of diverge because I mean, honestly, what we're talking about, what we talked about Hitchcock in general, kind of sums up Psycho for me. But you hit a very important point that actually branches out to other movies for their time. That again, I was like, I kind of think it was very dangerous ground, which was Village of the Damned and Rosemary's Baby, because we're talking about a very censored era. And to have someone impregnated with Satan's child, or pretty much children being a true idea of evil, was, again, I wouldn't necessarily say horrific or horrifying, but there it is.
Yep, I have to do the Google on this one.
Womble doesn't know horror.
Yeah,
I had to Google that myself, though, honestly. I'm Village of the Damned, at least. I know Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah, Rosemary's Baby is, again, iconic because not a whole lot of movies directly. They may talk about some evil entity at some point, and a lot of movies didn't even do it that much then. But Rosemary's Baby directly said in the movie, this is Satan's child.
Antichrist.
Goddamn Americans. If you said that in the UK at the same time, like Satan's child, nobody would have cared.
Oh, okay. Just going back to Psycho, it's when you look at the film, they've done like the kind of twist that we see a lot in horror movies now, but for the time, this was new ground. I mean, Womble already ruined like the twist already, so I might as well explain it.
Damn it, Womble.
Well, I didn't. I said something that was completely wrong. I said that it was actually the woman in the shower that was the murderer.
Oh, well, now you said it. Now you said it's wrong, so now we can like.
Now I could hear Roy's brain literally reboot.
But it was like, okay, so we now know this trope is like all over it, especially in like Scream and stuff, but like setting up a main character played by a popular actress and then just killing her off in like the first act of the film, because the first half of the film is a completely different movie from the rest of the movie, and
yeah,
that is a noticeable change, but it's also it takes a lot of risks in terms of like catching the audience at the time off guard. Unfortunately, some of that is gone because, as I said, most people know the twist of this movie, especially who the main villain is. I'm not gonna try to spoil it here, but yeah. But I do want to give Hitchcock credit for doing that kind of story. Yeah, pretty much.
The main villain is Hitchcock himself.
Yep, Hitchcock and his sexual harassment suits.
Yep.
So, because now we're starting to get into what Womble and we're gonna fight. We're just gonna fight from here on out. Because moving into the 70s and 80s, this is where my horror movie, like, this is where my true love comes out. Because a lot of what we've been talking about is, because some of the movies we're even saying may not necessarily be good, but spawned good or, appreciation. These are the movies that I actually are like, you don't have to appreciate. No, they're fucking good. I love them. Across the board. Because, like, in the 70s, just to throw out a couple, don't even really want to talk about them, but I want to give them credit. Jaws was originally said to be a horror movie. Same thing with Alien. Most people don't.
Awesome. Alien is probably the best horror film of all time. I will give you that.
Yeah, now with the genres out there, it's now a sci-fi movie more than a horror, but it was originally intended to be a horror movie.
The first one's a horror film.
I agree.
Sequels are sci-fi. The first one's definitely a horror film. And what was the other one? Jaws. Yeah, that's a horror film as well.
Yeah. It was also the first major blockbuster created. It's very influential. Spielberg became a big name because of it. We don't have to talk too much about it, but it's a very big film.
But I mean, that is what horror films should be. But then because of Jaws, you've got shitty shark movies like Jurassic
Sharknado.
Sharknado.
What the fuck is Jurassic Shark?
There was one that came out this year that had a shark in it, and he was the bad guy, and I was just like, oh.
Wait, what the fuck is Jurassic Shark? I've never even heard of that movie.
Oh, have you not heard? Oh, you don't.
Attack of the Jurassic Shark.
No, and then we can't forget the epic. I think it was called Mega Shark versus Crocosaurus.
Oh God.
Or like Mega Shark versus Giant Octopus or something like that.
It was something really bad.
Asylum is just a master of making amazing films.
That's all because of Jaws. And I as much as I love Spielberg and I love Jaws, I hate him for that.
Honestly, like that argument, that's like the equivalent of hating a man who's done a lot of good just because his son became a murderer. That's pretty much the equivalent of your argument.
I hate Hitler's dad.
Touche, sir.
That should just be the title of the episode. I just hate. It has nothing to do with anything. This is
The Shallows. That was the other one. The Shallows.
well,
That came out this year. That was awful.
okay.
Childhood, the true horror.
I hate.
There was one good thing about The Shallows, and that was what they did with the phone.
Yeah,
It was very much Sherlock sort of style. I like that, but that's nothing to do with the horror of the film. Like, the first half an hour was much more compelling, and then they just threw her in the water, and then there was a shark that had bit her, and that was it. It was boring
right?
from then on out.
Well, I mean, okay, with Jaws, and again, I won't say this about horror movies, I'll say this about not even movies, just anything. Jaws helped spearhead a lot of great movies, and about 10 times more shit movies, but that's just kind of the nature of the beast. It's everyone's going to try to, jump on that bandwagon and make shitty writing and try to just pump something out to make a buck.
So you want to talk more about the 70s and 80s besides Jaws and stuff?
Yeah, we need to get on because we've been doing it for 45 minutes. So.
Yeah, two movies I just want to say for the lighting, the actual filming of it. Suspiria. Yeah, that's another iconic movie. And The Abominable Mr. Phibbs. Visually, as far as special effects, whatever, but as far as
isn't it Abominable Mr.
Abominable.
Dr. Phibes. Not
Yes.
Abominable, it's Abominable.
Phibbs, Phibes, tomato. Those movies did something that, again, we were kind of talking about with the gore movies, which I agree with you completely on, Womble. There was blood and gore in the movies, yes, but more of the suspense came from the music, the lighting, the imagery involved, more than just throwing blood around. And I just wanted to give those two credit. But speaking about the complete opposite side, this is also when The Exorcist, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and Halloween came out.
Yep.
Now we're talking about the shit ones. Here we go.
Womble is going to be very controversial and very pissy.
The Exorcist is a pile of wank. That's all I'm gonna say. I was told
time for all the hate
the
comments.
most scariest film of all time. I watched it and I was so unimpressed. It's just a girl having sick on herself. Womble is wrong about life.
I'm going to screen cap that and put that in the video.
Yeah, you're going to have that in.
Okay, continuing with Exorcist, Chainsaw Massacre, what else you said?
I haven't seen Halloween, but Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I've seen that, and the remake. They did a remake, didn't they?
They've done yes, by now.
The Halloween remake, I think Rob Zombie did it.
Yeah, I've heard about it. It looks awful.
I haven't seen the remake
Rob
either.
Zombie's movies I enjoy, but I don't feel anything impacting about them. First of all, Exorcist, it's the desensitized generation won't appreciate it as much. And again, it's a very U.S. culture thing is what made it scary because, again, in the 70s, we were very much still on a religious upswing for a lot of things. Yeah. So when that movie came out, especially with a lot of the superstition around that movie, definitely added to it. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, that was the first movie that it really plugged the idea that it was inspired by real events. This wasn't something that was just in a movie that people came up with in their head. This actually, and I mean, of course, they took a lot of liberties with it, but still, this really happened to some degree. It allows you to empathize with the characters a little more, in my opinion, because these, at some point, were off real people and they were really going through something. But Halloween, the music involved, there wasn't, for slasher films, there wasn't a whole lot of blood. It actually is considered probably one of the more suspenseful out of the genre. But that music, in my opinion, was one of the best music for a horror movie to date. And the trio of terror, Michael Myers, Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees, those are my buddies. I want to have pizza with them. Michael Myers really spearheaded the 80s slasher genre, and the music is just I can't go off enough about the music. You get the idea.
Well, I can't talk for Halloween because I haven't seen it, but I've actively gone out of my way to avoid it because I know it's a film that I'm not going to enjoy.
You gotta try, man. You gotta try try new food. You gotta give it a taste just to make sure he's Mr. Womble doesn't try it.
Maybe one day I will get around to watching that, but as for the others, like The Exorcist, the reason why that just doesn't work on a lot of the levels, and it's not just me culturally either, I've seen it done 150 million times in the other films that came before it. So that's why I was just like not bothered by it, and it didn't shock me at all. It was just kind of fairly boring, if I must say so. And it was ridiculous as well because like it's just it's
a lot. I disagree. The spider body
Womble
being
just had a stroke now.
But I mean,
you finish your aneurysm, sir, because
then we
you're
get to
just
like
wrong.
The Conjuring, the Conjuring, which I do
movie
like. I
that
do actually
happened
really
30
like The
years
Conjuring.
later.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But
So-
that kind of spawned from that. So I can give The Exorcist a little bit. I can give it a little nibbit because it did spawn that kind of type of movie where it's religious thing.
Well,
and the only one good thing that I've ever seen out of it is The Conjuring. And that's, I think, more, not the source material, but I think that's the director, because he knows how to use jump scares, he knows how to suspense, he knows how to build on tension, and he knows how to tell a good story, or a bad story. He can tell a bad story, and it works.
I want to say her name is Linda Blair, but I'm pretty sure I'm wrong. The child actress actually did really good in The Exorcist, in my opinion. They actually wrote it for a child.
Yeah, it's a very uncanny valley kind of feeling to like this demon. I mean, I think it's very effective. I think it's.
See, I didn't.
uh,
I just don't like it.
everyone has the right
that's
to their
fine. You're
opinion.
just
Everyone
wrong.
has their.
No, because well, for one, child actors in Hollywood,
You just hate
are
children.
generally fucking awful.
You
anyway,
just hate children
Like,
in general.
There's very, very rare moments when you get a fantastic child actor that is believable and compelling. Like in The Exorcist, I just don't care about that child. I don't care. I don't care about her parents. I don't care about the priest. Like, I just don't care about any of the characters. Like, there's nothing in the whole context that made me want to watch that again and made me want to think, oh yeah, I really hope that they save this child. No, like, I don't care.
Well, I mean, if I had to give you a quote, sir, that's what it would be. Life, I don't care.
May the power of Christ
All
compel
I'm
you.
pointing out is, again, it's with like the pea soup thing. I agree with you, but with like a lot of the levitations and the camera focus and body contortioning, which became super big in the 2000s, a lot of that stuff was spawned from The Exorcist. So the 80s, let's talk about slash for a second, because now I need to fight, because Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th. I mean, okay, Shining good, ta-da. I mean, but like Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, let's even go with like Pumpkinhead and Child's Play, like the slasher movie genre. A lot of people don't like, and I totally get that. I totally get it's not your cup of tea, but it is not a dumb movie.
Actually, with Nightmare on Elm Street, like, I can give that merit because that kind of does hold suspense fairly well. Because it's believable and it's compelling. It's the films that came after that.
Nightmare on Elm Street is believable.
It's believable because it was about the teenagers not being able to face sleeping and dreaming, and like it was more. It wasn't about the monster that I liked. It was more about the condition of being scared to go to sleep and being scared.
Yeah, this is a very good. It's an amazing horror
that's
concept.
a very human thing, and I could appreciate that. I don't necessarily like the film, but I could appreciate that and what it did.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of techniques in that build on the suspense and that build on the characters. Not that I can name the characters apart from
Johnny Depp.
Johnny Depp.
Johnny Depp as that guy in that movie.
Yeah. But I mean, like, I can't like name the actual characters, but like I remember when I watched it that I kind of wanted them to succeed, and obviously because it's a film, so
Yeah, definitely.
it's the films that came after that, the sequels. That
Again,
were just
this is the same
abhorrently
exact argument.
offensive.
Just because.
And
I disagree.
no, because they just got more and more ridiculous and more stupid.
Honestly,
and they just involve characters that you just
first of
didn't
all,
care about.
I don't remember Nightmare on Elm Street taking an IQ test, so telling me a movie is stupid, I kind of ignore in general. But there's a point where
the writers were stupid.
I think they actually did the right thing because, well, first of all, I agree with you, especially with going to sleep. It's something you can't escape. So it's not like they're trapped in a house that they can get away from. they can't escape the horrific part. And let's just
of their bodies.
Take Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street franchises. There's a point where that formula doesn't work for horror anymore, and I feel the writers very much understood that. So they went from moving into a horror to a comedy with horror elements, and I actually really thought that was a really good idea. There was still a lot of horror, but again, horror isn't just about being scared. It's also
but then
about
it takes away
challenges.
from the original because
Not necessarily.
you've created a string of movies, and that's all supposedly one universe.
Yes.
And by the end of that universe, it's just a farce. It's just an absolute mess. It's silly, ridiculous comedy with horror in it. And you've just
Kinda like
then
what I just
said
said.
that in that universe, this character is no longer scary. And then they didn't do it because they wanted to enhance the genre. They did it because they saw it as an easy cash grab, because that's what horror films are. They are an easy cash grab. They are easy to make. And I know this because I've worked on horror films. They are cheap, they are easy, and it takes very little time, apart from makeup. Like, makeup's probably the largest amount of time that you ever have.
Well, horror movies
in a
are
horror
also
set.
are notorious for their practical effects before the 2000s. I mean, in a good way, but I don't think. I think the movies later on, there definitely needed to be a cutoff, and they definitely overextended that to a certain degree. But adding a little
By a long
comedy,
way.
because time, a lot of what you're arguing is we've had in this entire movie mumble. Time will do that anyways to any of these movies. I
Yep.
look back at the original, Nightmare on Elm Street, and it's not scary more for these reasons, or Friday the 13th. But they kept to a lot of the same ideas. Freddy, even in number one, always had just kind of this twisted sense of humor. These were also, and it kind of goes back to a lot of things that I feel they did right, blurring the lines between right and wrong. Freddy was burned alive, and he's seeking revenge. Wouldn't you kind of do the same? Friday the 13th franchise, Jason Voorhees watched his mother die, who died by trying to avenge his death in the first place.
That was another thing. You found out about the character of the villain, and the whole purpose of why he was scary is because you didn't know about him, and then you find out his backstory. That's ridiculous and stupid and pointless. And why did they even? Why? What's the point in giving a backstory for a character that's so enticed in
There's
mystery?
a social commentary
It's like the
to it,
box.
because you're talking about this person where you look at and say he's the villain, he's evil, he's wrong, and then you can see why he, to some degree, it's now very arguable and debatable why it's justified what he did.
No. I'm wagging my finger at my microphone right now.
I could feel it.
No, like, it's... Have you ever seen the J.J. Abrams talk that he did at TED about the box, the mystery box? Whenever you know, like, whatever's in that box, you're curious about, you talk about it, you want to know about it. The minute you open the box, it's just rubbish, because it's just something that's in a box, and whatever it is, it loses that value, it loses that meaning, you lose that mystery, and that's what
My
they did with
counter-argument
those
is the horror
franchises.
movie.
That
Hellraiser.
mystery
When you
has
open
gone.
that box, there's more bullshit in there.
Well, no, because you're always going to be confined by what is actually in the box when you find out what's in the box. Like, when you have a closed box and you don't know what's in there, it could literally be anything, and then that's the audience's imagination running away. And that's what, for me, makes psychological horror films so good, is because it's the audience's imagination that is going along with them. And that is why I don't like the campy comedy backstory thing, especially with horror.
But even in your own argument, you can find it in a box of a single perspective, because other objectives in horror movies is, again, you're talking about just pure scary, where there's other things that can cause dread, like empathizing with the murderer.
Right, as you said, that kind of aspect of mystery works really well for psychological horror, but for a slasher genre, there are different.
Okay, so let's move that a little bit and let's shift it. So empathizing with the murderer.
Yes.
That creates another box, because then you're constantly worrying or thinking, what would I do in that situation?
Exactly.
But when you get Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street,
Yeah.
and you take such a classic, iconic villain that has already been established and you're already scared of, and then you break it down, then when you go back to see it, you're like, but maybe I wouldn't do that. That's a little bit too extreme. Like, I wouldn't do that.
Well, you're actually talking about something that actually fills people with the level of uncomfort and distress. It's called pretty much cognitive dissonance. When you're the type of individual who says, I would never do these things, then you empathize with someone who would, thinking that there's a possibility you would. It actually fills you with a certain level of uneasiness and uncomfortable. It may not scare you, but it definitely fills you with negative feelings.
Yeah, but I don't get that. I just look at those films now, and I'm just like, I don't really care. So does that mean I'm a murderer, or am I just don't care about?
What it means is
people?
you're dissect, and this is also a very common psychological thing. If you dissect it from a very removed, desensitized fashion, of course you're not going to connect with anybody. So it's like, am I a murderer? No, you've never even connected for the possibility to even be explored.
Oh, he calling you a disconnected man.
When it comes to dissecting,
I
was gonna say, when it comes to dissecting movies, I think that's a fair assessment.
I just want to point out, in the very first Friday the 13th, let's establish, Jason wasn't the bad guy. He was.
No. I want to go back. I want to go back to Nightmare on Elm Street because really, really quickly, because I haven't seen Friday the 13th, and I'm going to lose my thread. Nightmare on Elm Street, right?
Yeah.
Like, the first film, you're not emphasizing. You don't care about the bad guy, and that doesn't matter because it's not really about him. It's about the kids that are trying to stay awake. Like that is what it's about. It's about their journey. It's not about the villains.
I disagree.
And it's no. I don't care if you disagree. I'm right because that is what that film was designed
this is
to
like
do.
The most
they didn't write that
episode.
film thinking it was going to be a success. They wrote that film. Stop typing in Discord, goddammit. They wrote that film. they wrote that film just wanting to tell a story about the main characters and beyond. Thanks. Wanting to write a story about these characters that were put in a fairly real situation or a fairly real fear. The main villain doesn't really matter that much. Now, it helps build the tension, it helps build the suspense that he's there, but it has to be an object. You don't need to know anything about him. Because it's not his story. You're not seeing it through his eyes. If you were seeing it through his eyes, then you would always be in the dream world. And then these characters would just appear. Like, if you were generally seeing it through his eyes, then you can do an origin story of how he got there. In fact, I would like to watch that. That would be fairly more interesting. Like,
Hannibal Rising or
you
something?
see it. Yeah, but it's the fact that the first film isn't. It is about the kids. And they are the main characters. You see it from their point of view.
That is a very textbook answer.
You see it from the victim's point of view.
And there are certain points I agree with because of the textbook, but unlike what the textbook might teach you, there could be more than one perspective and point in a movie. Turns out there's your eyes and your mind doesn't have to be locked into one concept. It can be about the kids, it can be about Freddy Krueger, and it can be about the parents, which is also another important aspect in that movie.
But that isn't the original intention.
And I don't think the original intention could have, doesn't always have to matter in that case. Remember the death of the author
I would
concept.
say that the original intention is definitely the better way. Because that was the way the story was told.
I cannot tell you what the original intent is because I have not read anything on it. So anything I am saying would be guessing. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Okay. Well, shall we take that point and then we'll move on because we spoke about.
I just want to say one quick thing. I just want to say one quick thing. I just think I'm not actually even the biggest fan of the first Friday the 13th movie, but I do think I really like the ending of it because it does kind of throw you a curveball in the fact that at first it seems like just a bunch of asshole teenagers you don't actually care as much about than the Nightmare on Elm Street ones. But I do think the aspect of Jason, who isn't the main character or the main villain in that last film, was actually Jason's mom. Spoiler alert. Jason's mom that's actually the main bad guy who's committing all the murders, and there's a real psychology to it, and I do think it kind of does add to the franchise, and it adds to the characters, and the character of Jason in particular. Yeah, honestly, I'm not even the biggest fan of Friday the 13th as a franchise, but I do think it is such an interesting...
I've not seen it, so...
Yeah, well, then, yeah.
Yep. Yeah, not much to say about the 90s. I mean,
There's
Oh yeah,
Scream.
don't forget that blockbuster hit, the Blair Witch Project.
Oh well, there's Scream and Blair Witch. I think are the two biggest like
and
horror
Sixth
films.
Sense.
Oh yeah, and that too. Yeah.
Oh, and Seven.
Oh, that's a
Wait,
big.
no, Sixth Sense is 2000s. Is it? Wait, no.
Wait, no, it's
not.
not.
It's
It's
not.
not.
It's not.
No, it's not.
Yeah, it's 90s. Yeah,
You are.
98, 99.
99.
Well, okay, so
1999.
one brilliant horror film. Sixth Sense is a fantastic horror film.
Scream.
Again, that's about suspense building, and
Yeah. I mean,
you
Sixth Sense
see
was
the ghosts like 3 or 4 times, I think. Apart from the main character,
a little more than
spoiler
that.
alert, but...
Spoiler alert.
But I mean, it wasn't.
Well,
this
I
is
don't
one
know.
I'll
There's
say
like
it wasn't
a few
about
occasions,
those
but
ghosts.
they don't overdo it, and there's only like one gore moment, which is the bit with the sick.
Yeah.
And that was actually a really good jump scare. That is actually a textbook example of a jump scare because it doesn't scare you, but it builds on the suspense.
Yeah. I was just going to say Womble and I, with all these movies, are pretty much going to repeat the same thing, but I liked Blair Witch. It was really good. Seven, I thought, was really good. Silence of the Lambs, I thought, was really good. Scream, I thought, was really good.
Seven's fantastic. That's David Fincher. That's psychological.
That's a very good film.
The only thing I feel there's any argument, Scream, where we're talking about the campy, they owned it from the get-go versus the other movies we're talking about, and I think that worked for Scream.
Well, yeah, no, that did work for Scream because that was the intent. They were really taking the mick out of the horror genre.
Yeah.
I think it's revolutionary in that it's a post-modern... Now everything's fucking post-modern now, which you can argue whether that's good or not, but I think it kind of... To this day, horror films are postmodern in a sense that they're aware of their cliches, and that might kind of be a problem in some cases because that just disconnects you automatically from like anything like about the characters or anything of the story like that. It can work. Well, it can work for like Cabin in the Woods.
Don't be lazy about it.
Cabin in the Woods was brilliant. That worked fantastic.
Yeah, in that kind of deconstruction of horror films.
Tucker and Dale versus Evil.
Yeah, so that kind of stuff can work.
Yeah, and that's where again they / Tucker and Dale versus Evil, Cabin in the Woods, Evil Dead 2 back in the I think it was an 80s movie.
Shaun of the Dead.
Yeah,
Shaun of the Dead.
Shaun of
thank
the Dead.
you. But for 2010s, I mean, they tried some things that failed with some movies, in my opinion. Other things they did really good. I thought The Ring was really good.
No.
Oh, more.
It's all the same reasons, though. It's all the same reasons.
What did you think about 28 Days Later?
That's a brilliant film. That's Danny Boyle at at the peak of his powers as well.
It kind of went back to the original zombie idea. It wasn't about the zombies, it was about the people.
And it pretty much, the first episode of The Walking Dead, yeah, exactly, literally is the first episode of The Walking Dead. Beat for beat as well.
There's 2 movies I really want Womble's opinion so we can so one of us could get a black eye. What'd you think of Paranormal Activity? The first one? Just the first one.
I haven't seen it.
Okay.
I haven't seen it.
Oh,
well, there we go.
I'm probably going to hate it. I don't like found footage stuff.
Yep, I loved it. I generally don't like found footage.
The exception is
Parallel
Cloverfield. I like Cloverfield.
Cloverfield was great. Watch when you have some free time, you're bored. Watch it so we can fight about this off camera because I'm just curious about your perspective. What'd you think about the new 2010 Evil Dead?
Haven't seen that either.
Okay. Well, there you go.
Dude, what's your opinion? What's your opinion on it?
They took a movie. They didn't try to redo it. They tried to bring it back into a horror movie. I loved it. You can't compare it to Evil Dead or Evil Dead 2. It's comparing apples and oranges because the intent was drastically different. I loved everything about it, though. I loved the new Evil Dead was great.
Okay, I just want to talk. Okay, so 2000s and maybe modern day after that. 2000s pretty much like the gore torture porn where it really got established with Saw, Hostel.
Oh yeah, Saw.
I am not a big fan of any of that. It spawned Human Centipede. It spawned all this.
Oh god.
Most of that stuff I'm not a big fan of. I was okay with Human Centipede. I loved Saw.
Well, the first one,
the
first Saw wasn't that bad. It has an interesting story, and it's very claustrophobic, and you feel like you are trapped in this room with the 2 characters, and it's small as well. The challenges that are given to these 2 characters aren't really over the top. The ones from then onwards were just ridiculous and over the top. I've seen like the second and the third, and then I just got fed up with the whole thing.
Okay, so I haven't seen the first Saw, but have any of you guys seen the short film Saw, which was created before the first Saw movie, which I have seen, and I did really enjoy it. It is
You got to see the first Saw then. If you like the short,
Yeah, I know.
if you like the short, watch the first Saw.
I might see the first Saw. I'm not sure about any of the other Saw movies because I'm not a big fan of that kind of torture porn kind of horror.
It's not really a torture thing in the first one.
It's very torture
more
porn
about
genre. I mean, Saw really created that torture porn idea and mainstreamed it. But it's one of those. Don't look at the 10 behind it because only 2 of them are going to be good. Look at the original intent, and it did everything. The only thing I will spoil for anybody is it also brought back the idea the bad guy wins, which I like that.
Yeah.
In horror movies, it should be a legitimate concern who's going to make it out alive, if anybody.
True. Yeah, true. But kind of talking a bit about the Saw short that I have seen, I think it's a very short and simple concept. Establishes a main character. He's kind of a douche, which is kind of important for these types of Saw series because it's kind of a weird kind of redemption thing. Like, as you were saying about empathizing with a villain, you can kind of see why the villain would do these kinds of things.
Oh, yeah.
To teach people lessons. It's obviously not the right way to do it, but
that is actually the point of the first film, is the fact, and this goes back to my problem with Nightmare on Elm Street, is the fact that they didn't establish this in the first film. They establish a number of stories in the first film of Saw, and that is that of the villain. And the focus is actually from the villain's point of view. It's not from the reporter's point of view, and it's not from the doctor's point of view. It's from the villain's point of view. And that makes it compelling, and that makes it kind of, I wouldn't say brilliant, but I would definitely say very good to watch. Now, here we go, because this is where I'm saying that James Wan is probably the only horror director that is doing this, and is still doing this. He does a really good job of that. And I've just Googled it. James Wan did direct the original short.
Yeah.
So, and he also directed Conjuring, too.
Yes, exactly, yeah. And I like The Conjuring as well. Not as keen on The Conjuring 2, because it was very much the same. Yeah. But the first Conjuring, I actually really enjoy that film. I think it's very good to watch. It's probably one of my favourite horror films because, and for me to say that, especially in modern times when there's no good horror films coming out at all, like conventional, weird monster horror films where there's subnormal activities going on, I don't like that sort of thing. I didn't really like it back then. The Shining is probably an exception because that is weird. There's another force that's subhuman. But it builds on it really well, and Stanley Kubrick is just amazing on all levels. And then like Alien, which we've referenced before, I like that as well. But those are like the exceptions. To have one director in the whole horror genre that can do these things isn't a good thing.
I agree.
Because there's so many other things, especially because horror is such a cheap thing to make. Everyone has a go at doing horror. Students do horror, and I think the majority of things that come out of like universities are 10 times better than the stuff that's being pumped out of Hollywood at the moment. And that's because they don't have that law, they don't have that structure of every film has to have loads of jump scares, loads of whatever. And now, really, for me, I would say that horror is better suited in the short film area. So you look at Lights Out, which came out earlier this year. That short, the original short, is phenomenal. Like,
thank you for that,
it plays
by the way.
on a real fear, and you don't see too much of the villain.
Yeah.
That they tried to expand whatever a name's story was, and they just added a massive load of bullshit story to it, and that's what horror films are. It's good ideas to try and pump the adrenaline round your body, and just executed really bad with bad stories, and really poorly directed and poorly acted. And that's the majority of horror films, and that's why I don't like horror.
Well, here's my perspective, and I actually believe the reason why you say horror movies could be better is the exact problem on why they're getting worse. I know, me and Womble have an exact opposite opinion. Surprise. First of all, Saw...
I'm just neutral.
Just kind of... I don't feel it was in the perspective of the killer. I think that was, again, one of the perspectives, because they spun the perspective a few times, and I really appreciated that, especially with the doctor, because I think the problem with horror movies is they're trying to textbook and make it too formulaic and drag it out because it needs to be this amount of time. If it's a short movie, great. If not, but and if it's not a short movie, then don't do it. But I think the problem is stick to the people who want to watch it and don't try to appease the people who don't want to watch it. Because again, with slasher, you want to empathize with the killer. You want to think about all the social context underneath. You want you want to empathize with the kids so you care if they live or die. And people who will not look at a movie that way, don't try to appease them because you're not. And I think the problem is that they're trying to create this movie that, you know, for the horror genre in general, that no matter what type of movie it is, anyone can go see because they want to make the money, instead of sticking to the fan base of, you know, psychological thriller. Let's make something a little more Womble. For slasher, let's make something a little more for Ashe. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. I would say that the slasher has a place and it can be good. It's just that it's following such a stale and used formula now.
I agree 100%.
You can't get a thrill out of them anymore. And I actually, thinking about it, I probably will go and watch the 80s films, like the original Halloween, the original whatever the other one was that I hadn't seen, I can't remember.
Friday the 13th?
Yeah, and I will enjoy them, and they will be fine. It's just, Friday the 13th, that was the other one. As to say, to turn me to being a horror fan, that's never going to happen, because we've still got this stale formula that doesn't work.
Okay. So, any closing thoughts? Because this has been going on for an hour and 20 minutes.
Yeah.
I warned you.
I would say, to make slasher films good again, use monsters in moderation. In horroration. Hey. In moderation.
Pew, 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 pew.
Oh, God. Yeah.
So, like, everything needs to be done in moderation. That's what I want. Also, I hate horror.
Okay. Ashe, closing thoughts. You were our guest. You really did do a lot for this podcast. It was awesome having you. Honestly, I think I like just seeing you guys argue so much. I honestly kind of want to bring you back for some... Not... Like, I might want to see you come back to the show at some point.
I was giving a pause because I'm assuming you're going to edit that part out. And if not, I'm in it.
No, he doesn't edit anything. He leaves all the bullshit.
No, I don't. No, that is not true at all. There's a lot of bullshit in this video I'm going to edit out. Like this, for example, I'm probably going to edit out. Maybe in a bloopers section. I'm not doing that. Never mind. Yeah, so Ashe, any final thoughts?
Yeah, so for my final thoughts, the only thing is just to reemphasize the point is I'm not expecting people to walk away from a lot of this saying they love horror movies. My whole idea was the appreciation for it, what it's done for movie industries on certain levels, for pop culture, that it's expanded to its own genre of not just movies, but again, it's a music. There's an entire subculture outside of goth that involves just pure horror movies and like the horror genre. And again, you don't even have to think the movies are good. All I want you to do is appreciate the history or the idea that and the effort that is put into a horror movie. And that's really all I wanted. So I hope it worked for some of you.
Well, from a movie maker's point of view, as much as I hate on films, I do appreciate how much time and effort it does go into these things. It's and like you said, all the classics that you were literally mentioning, I do like. So apart from like The Exorcist, I hate that one. I can't stand that film. I don't care.
Okay. The most recent horror film that I've seen that I think really scared me? The 2016 presidential election. Yeah.
Pew, pew, pew,
pew, pew, pew.
Pew, 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 pew. God,
Wait,
okay.
what election? What
mine election. American
US
election.
2016
Yeah,
election.
I know. I was joking. I was being ignorant, but I was trying to play on the whole world not being around America, you know.
I legitimately thought it was. So why do I care about your elections?
With all the bullshit that Ashe and Womble have been arguing about, might as well make this a controversial episode. But yeah, honestly, yeah. Once again, I think I spoke the least out of everybody in this whole episode, despite this being my channel. But I'm not complaining. I
don't know. The first half an hour, I was completely silent because we
That's
went
true,
through
but
a stage of movies that I have just not watched.
Yeah, it's true. But I think most of this episode was just you and Ashe just arguing over that.
We're all friends, though. It's fine.
Half the fun about this stuff is arguing.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm not going to be able to get this episode by Halloween because it's literally tomorrow when that's it's a long episode. But horror is a movie genre that has gone through a lot of shifts and turns and all that stuff, as we've discussed. It's a very divisive genre, as you can tell from this episode. But I think the main thing is it has a lasting impact in cinema. It's very influential towards cinema.
Anyway, guys, I've been Mr. Womble. This is Roy Johnson.
And
this has been Ashe.
This Ashe K Reaper. Check out my channel.
Yeah, he's a Ripper.
Yeah.
See you all next time. We're all fools and horses here. See if you can guess what I am. Bye!
You're a fucking ass. That's what you are. Okay, that's it. That's it.